Hi, folks. Just as you trickle in here, we're going to get started at 2 minutes past the hour. I'd love to hear kind of where you are in the world. Please use the chat. I'm here in Toronto in Canada. It's sunny, it's nice, it's cold, but it is windy. So if you hear any wind on my side on the audio, I apologize. I don't know why there's a wind tunnel in my apartment building. Anyways, Josh, where are you?
I'm in Chicago.
Chicago.
Yeah, so a little bit warmer than Toronto, but still.
Chicago's the windy city, though, right?
It is, yeah. But not for because it's super windy. It's more due to the political nature of Chicago. It gathers its nickname. So, but it does get windy from time to time here.
Nice. I actually didn't know that. I just always assumed it was because it was windy, to be perfectly honest.
Boston is windier than Chicago.
Right.
Boston's the windiest city in the United States versus Chicago. But Chicago gets its wind because of the hot air from its folks. So that's where it gets the name from. Fun fact, you learned something here today.
I did. I genuinely did. And I love that you knew about Boston being a windier city. You would only learn that having, lived in Chicago.
Right. Yeah.
Nice. So where is everyone? Please, ping us in the chat. Love to hear from you. We're going to get started in just 1 minute. Louisiana. Chi-Town.
There you go.
Tiffany. Austin, Texas. Last time I was in Austin was for ZeroCon.
Yeah, the BlanketCon.
BlanketCon, yeah, when it snowed.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I was so excited to go somewhere warm when Toronto in December is it's cold.
Yeah.
I was like, I'll get a couple days respite. It'll be awesome. And I go to Austin. It snows for the first time in 3 years. Awesome.
Yeah.
And Trini Scott calling in from Nacogdoches, Texas. I hope I got that wrong.
Nacogdoches.
Okay, I'm not good at that. Sweet. So let's get rolling. Thank you everyone for joining us today. This is another episode of our Trailblazers series where we get to talk to leaders in the cloud accounting industry, learn their story, hear about the highs, the lows, what they've learned along the way. And so super excited to have Josh here with us today.
Hey everybody.
Just a couple of quick housekeeping items. This is being recorded, so we will send a recording after this. There aren't really any slides, so probably won't send any slides, but we'll send the recording for sure. If you have any questions, hit that QA button or post it in the chat. I'll try to incorporate them as we're going through. We'll also have 10, 15 minutes at the end to just go through any questions that folks might have. So without further ado, let's get into it. So Josh, I think a lot of people kind of know you in the accounting industry, both with your firm, which is like a Zero Platinum partner, as well as your work with Practice Ignition. And I think you were also previously like a Zero ambassador, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Doing it all.
So tell us a little bit more about Lance CPA, kind of just some general background.
Yeah, so Lance CPA Group was a firm I founded about 6 years ago now, going on almost on 6 years. I had always wanted to start my own CPA firm practice. I didn't know what I was doing at all at that time. I worked at a large CPA firm for a number of years in their audit department, which I don't do audits now at all. So I know that carried over, but did that for a number of years. And just from working in that firm, found things I didn't like I didn't like all the travel, and I didn't like keeping my time, and like all these things where it's like, you got frustrations about I know a better way to do a firm. I know how to do this, right? And then I went and did it, and then just, struggled along there trying to figure out what I was doing. So that's really how Lance CPA Group was birthed. We're a fully virtual remote firm. I've been that way the entire time. So my kind of goal when we built this was I want to be home with my family and not be on the road all the time. And I, don't want to be stuck in an office, forever. And so built it so everyone can work from home and serve our clients that way, using all cloud-based technology, and just doing things kind of a little bit differently. And I've been doing that since then. We're a team of now 19 individuals. And we specialize in working in the craft brewing and digital agency markets. So those are kind of our two main niches that we work in.
Nice. So what was the tipping point? What happened at that big firm? You're like, you know what? Screw it. I'm going out on my own.
Yeah.
This is it. It's time.
Yeah. So it was the middle of a busy season. This was probably mid-February. And I had a stretch of travel that had me just crisscrossing the United States. And I literally, I basically stayed at Hampton Inns all the time because that was kind of a guarantee when you're in the middle of nowhere, Illinois or Missouri, like there'll at least be a Hampton Inn there that you can stay at. And so I literally woke up one morning, totally stressed out and like not knowing what city I was in. Like then there's no clue. Like, so I was just on the road so much. I literally had to go like to that little book that they have. It tells you about like where the restaurants are and all that stuff, and realized I was in Memphis, Tennessee, right? Like, and it was just at that point, it's like, what am I doing? Like, why am I putting myself through all this, stressing myself out, traveling for weeks on end where I can't see my family and just hopping from hotel to hotel to hotel. And at that point, it's like, all right, I gotta get out. Like that was my point where it was like, I can't do this anymore.
Okay, so you had no pre-existing client. You were just like, this is it. It's time. Let's go for it.
It's go time. Yeah, no client. It took a little time. I didn't quit right in the middle of tax busy season, but there was kind of a path there where I took to kind of end there and eventually start Lance CPA Group. But yeah, that was the tipping point. I was like, I can't do this anymore.
Cool. And so did you know roughly what services you wanted to offer in the beginning?
I had no clue. Honestly, I knew that, as I started to kind of study the market and study what's going on, especially with newer CPA firms and newer accounting firms and what they were doing with cloud technology and how they're operating, I knew I wanted to focus in on kind of client accounting services, bookkeeping, as a part of that, and doing some tax work as well, because I had some knowledge of that stuff just from some of my experience with some of my clients and some of the work I've done in the past. And so that was like, all right, I have kind of the tool set of what I want to do. It really kind of started more though with like picking the industry I want to work with. So I was a home brewer and home winemaker and enjoyed doing those things, enjoyed those hobbies. And so as I thought about like, if I'm gonna start my business and I want to have it focused in on something, craft breweries is a good place to start. That's right when all these craft breweries were starting to open up and kind of that boom was happening. And I thought, okay, this is a good time to kind of focus in on that industry. I have a good knowledge of that industry and what it needs to take from a financial and regulatory perspective. And so let's use that knowledge and let's focus in on there and see what they need. And really the focus then was that bookkeeping and tax is kind of the needs of what they needed.
Nice. So I love that you're like a home brewer. I actually didn't know that. I just assumed that you met like one of your clients had their own craft brewery and you're like, this is pretty cool. I like drinking beer, so I should do this together.
Yeah.
So how did you find that first client?
Yeah. So that was just, I threw up a ramshackle website and just started reaching out to people. And it's really what it was like, I had kind of a tune of what was going on in the market and some of the breweries that were starting to look to open. And I started reaching out and say, hey, I have some knowledge here in this industry. Like I'm starting this business. We're focused on working with craft breweries. Is there any way I can help you? And that started to get some conversations going and flowing. And from that started to get the first couple of brewery clients on the books. And then from there, it kind of started to get the kind of snowball of, like the craft brew industry is pretty tightly knit. And so once I started doing some good work for these clients, they started referring me out, and that started that kind of snowball process. Okay, now I'm picking up some more, doing a lot with content marketing. So having a lot of blog posts and social media and trying to speak at conferences in the brewing industry and things like that, just really kind of ginning up some of that, really kind of just organic content marketing, not spending money on paid ads or paid social media or anything like that, but just kind of organically going about it. And that started to bear some fruit as well.
Nice. And so how did you figure out, I think for a lot of people, they look at kind of all the different ways they could market their business.
Mm-hmm.
especially in the early days where like, crap, I kind of need some money coming in the door. How did you determine like what the best course of action is? It sounds like early days, it was kind of uh, like you basically did it manually, right? You did some reach outs, you connected with some local organizations that, hey, here's a service that I offer.
Yeah.
Any businesses that are a good fit. And then like growing from that, you started to make real like marketing investments.
Yeah.
How do you like, tell us about that journey?
Yeah, I think part of it was, just kind of looking at like, what are things I can do, and just with the limited skill set I have with the market. I'm not a marketer by trade at all, but what's the limited things I can do? And so, looking to see like, okay, I can write some blog posts, right? Like that's becoming a thing that people are doing. Like I can put some content out there, work on putting that content in the right spots, doing social media around it, trying to not be this kind of stale, boring CPA firm, but like saying, hey, I connect with your industry. Like you'll get me. I'm not going to come to your brewery in a suit and tie and like talk to you about finances, right? Like, and just doing those little things. And it was just like, and then being consistent with that. So not just doing it for a couple months and seeing what sticks. But like, okay, I'm just going to do this for years. I'm just keep on blogging just for years. Keep on doing it over and over, and starting to see that. Started to see the fruits of that labor that happened. It took like 6 months of actively doing that. And then you start to see like, all right, now I'm starting to get some traction with this. Some people are actually coming to my website and looking around and like, all right, we're getting somewhere, right? Like, and so I just continued on to that. And that's something we've done, ever since that, is just be consistent about, marketing and putting blogs and putting stuff on social media and just interacting in that way. Because for a virtual firm, no one's going to drive by us and like see, oh, there's Lance CPA Group, right? Like no one's going to see us, right? We don't exist in the real world in that way. But so we have to get our name out there and our kind of our footprint out there in a different matter there.
Yeah. Like the 6 months on content marketing, right? Like that is 100% bang on, whether you're an accounting firm or a software company.
Yeah.
It's like you just assume you're going to get nothing out of it for that period of time and just keep doing it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It feels like there was a little bit of like kind of a judgment call about like, hey, here's what I know I can do, and here's what I think would be valuable, and kind of just making a bet over a long period of time.
Yeah.
Until it actually started working. Like, were there moments, in that first 6 months when you started blogging where you're like, is this really worth it? I've got client files that I need to work on.
There was a little bit of that. There was a little bit of like, you just feel like you're talking in the void and no one's paying attention or listening to you. And you're just like, I'm going to keep on doing like a crazy person until someone starts listening. But no, it actually, I think for me, it was like, I'm trying to bootstrap this as much as possible. I didn't want to throw a ton of money and like, let's just buy a bunch of paid ads, or let's hire a copywriter just to write up a bunch of blog posts. Like I want this to be like a true reflection of us and who we are. And so some of that was like, it was like, all right, you kind of have to suck it up. Like, all right, I'm going to write a blog post today and get this out there. But it's also like, once you did that, like, and you saw that kind of fruit, it's like, all right, this is actually getting us somewhere. So I kind of give you the energy to continue doing it.
Yeah, like the underlying kind of message, just listening to that for me was like just being authentic, right? Like that sounds like you're like, I don't need a Facebook ad with a little video about Josh Lance. That's not me. Right. I want to write like a blog post, and that's cool, man. That's really cool. So what like in those early days, sounds like you got a decent amount of business just from kind of organic like referrals. Did you ever have to balance kind of the needs to like get leads right now, like get new clients in, versus kind of doing what you thought would bring kind of long-term success in your marketing?
There's a little bit at the beginning where it's like, there's gotta be food on the table and the mortgage gotta get paid, right? So you started taking on some clients that were not in niche, but they were willing to pay you and you did the work. And I think there's some good things that came from that, right? Like, yeah, that wasn't the ideal client for us, but I learned a lot by doing that, and learn, why I picked industries I did and why I like working with them, and do those things. But yeah, there was the early days of like, right, some random company that I know nothing about, like needs some help, and I'm going to do that for them. But once we started going and getting that niche, then it was like, right, we need to start to kind of prune those clients out, because they're going to be the thing that slows us down and not allow us to grow, or the thing that breaks our processes as we go. So there was a little bit of that, but I took those on knowing that was really short-term in nature, and that at some point we will have to make changes.
Got it. So if you were to go back to the beginning, would you do the same thing again?
Yeah, I think I would. Yeah, I think it proved out to be successful. I would probably, if I did anything differently, I would probably not, you know, be quick to take on some of those out of niche clients just to put food on the table, because it ended up being a lot more work than what it was worth, and kind of took me away from the goal I was trying to achieve. Right. So, you know, I think when you're like looking at goals and strategies and like the strategy to achieve your goals, right, when you start to take on things that are misaligned from that, that will kind of cause you to steer off course. And so it took me a while to like really see like, oh yeah, this is steering me off course. But if I had to do it again, I would probably be less hesitant to take on those clients, knowing that like what I was doing was going to, you know, prove successful, and like the path I chose and the way we chose about getting clients, you know, was fruitful.
Yeah. Yeah. It's weird, right? It's like, on the one hand, you can look back on that journey and say, maybe I should have been a little bit more patient in certain regards. But like, even if you were to go back knowing what you know today, you put yourself back in those shoes, you're like, you know, take that money.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. And then, you know, for the firms that are trying to figure out like how to market their business, let's say like really early days, like what's your recommendation? Like what are the things that you would suggest they do?
Yeah. I mean, I think having a good website's important. And I think sometimes that's a very low bar to clear in the accounting space. Of like, you see some really garbage websites that everyone has because it's the same company, you know, spinning out the same template over and over again. And so just having a decent website that actually reflects who you are and your brand and all that, I think is a key part of that, because that's how people, they're going to Google search you, and if they find your website and they're looking like, this is, why am I here? Like, I don't know what they do. Like, this seems old and outdated. Like, they're going to move on. And so having a good website, I think it's important. Invest in your brand, like, and thinking about what brand is for an accounting firm. I think a lot of accounting firms, it's just slap your name on the firm, and that's what it is. And even though our name is on the firm, again, that may be something if I did over again, I would probably not do. Just because I think there is, you know, there's something to be gained for having like a really strong brand and how you position yourself and how you speak about yourself and how that comes across on your website and your blog posts and your social media, and just how you approach the market. And we worked with a branding agency a couple of years in after we started, and it was so fruitful, just kind of figuring out like, what do people think of us, right? Like, and going through that process of identifying our brand is doing a lot of research on what clients think of you and what people who visit your website think of you who don't know you at all, and learning from that and being like, okay, how do we need to really get our message across, and what's the best way to do that? And so, you know, investing a little bit into your brand and kind of thinking that through, and I think does pay some dividends, because it really helps you think better about how you can market your firm as a result. And it's less about like, we do services, and it's more about like, this is the problems we solve, and here's our why, and here's what we believe. And that's what's going to start to attract people to your firm as a result.
Yeah. Like the reflection, I guess, at the beginning of the business is like, that feels hard, to be honest. Cause it's like, you're trying to get this thing to like stand up on its own two legs. And you're like, oh yeah, I got to think about like my why, and I got to think about like, what am I good at? 'Cause it's probably just me. And like, what am I, you know, that is that like, is there a tried and true process for that? Like, are there resources available out there that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's a tried and true process per se. Like, you know, when I started my firm, it was called Joshua Lance CPA LLC. Like, really, really original there thinking. And
What inspired that?
I know, like, who would come up with that name? But what I found is we started to think about that is like, your name does actually represent about who you are. And as we started to grow our firm, that was a limiting factor, because people saw that and they thought, oh, it's just a person. You know, I need someone, you know, we're a bigger company. I need someone, you know, more than just a guy doing it, right? And so, you know, some of those just like, I think little things about thinking about, you know, who you are and who you're trying to attract, and why should they be working with you? And thinking more about those types of things versus like, okay, well, we do bookkeeping and tax, or, you know, that's great, super. Like, why should I, what's the thing that's going to connect me with you? And just kind of thinking through that process. And so like, there's, I mean, we spent money with a branding agency, but even like, there's a book called Story Brand out there. which is just about like just thinking through the process, like what is your why, and like what makes you unique to the people who want to work with you, and why should they work with you, and just even reading through that book is just helpful kind of think through these questions and think through like what makes you tick and why someone should choose your firm, because a lot of what you have to say, maybe on that one-on-one case where you actually get them on the phone to talk to them, you can say those things through, but a lot of what they're gonna glean is those things that you don't say, and those things that show up from people that they talk to, or what they see on your website, or what they feel when they look at stuff, right? So trying to put the right foot forward there, I think, is important. Thinking through your brand is a key part of that.
Absolutely. And like, I think the other message there is you don't have to have it all figured out on day one, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's like you can start with being Josh Lance CPA,
Yeah.
and then grow that to however far you think that'll go, and then adjust course as you need to open up a new segment of customers.
Yeah.
or
Yeah, it doesn't have to be perfect on day one, and in some respects, it was better that it wasn't perfect on day one, because you got to kind of work through some of those challenges and make those mistakes early on when no one's seeing you doing that. And so then when you actually try to then like, hey, what's my next stage of where I'm trying to go? And you put that new kind of identity out there. You actually now have this kind of learned experience that you've had over time that really allows you to then really portray what you want and understand what you want at that point, right? Like the first couple of years was just trying to figure out like, how do I make this thing fly? And like, what am I doing even valuable? Do people care? Do people want this? And then once you kind of figure that stuff out, then it's, all right, how do I then like take it to that next level and like actually make this something that is viable for the long term?
Yeah. And so from the beginning, was it kind of like outsourced accounting services?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was very outsourced accounting services, bookkeeping, doing taxes for those businesses, pretty just bread and butter, basic type stuff.
Yeah, cool. And that stayed basically the same till today.
Yeah, that's still a core part of the business. Now we do more things beyond that. But those more things we did beyond that is really just listen to the needs of our customers. And you start hearing like, hey, can you help me with this? Can you help me with this? And it's the same question you're starting to hear across the board. It's like, okay, well, we should probably address that because that's what people need, right? Like, yes, they need that kind of compliance level, transactional level based stuff, but they want some other things. And you start to see common patterns around stuff. So like for us, we start to hear a common question or refrain around human resources and HR and things like that, right? Especially we're like in the brewing industry where there's high turnover of staff and there's a lot of part-time staff, and like trying to manage that is a lot. And so we started to hear a lot of like, we need help around this. We have questions around like, what do we need to do to have a good hiring process and make sure we have a good experience for our teammates and things like that, right? And so that started to develop more services on our end to meet those needs. Or you get those questions of like cash flow, and like, especially during COVID, right? Like that cash flow question came up across the board from everybody, right? And so how do you develop service around that is actually listen to what our customers want and then meeting that need as a result? Because, if you start to hear that same refrain a couple times over, it's likely that everyone has that same thing, just haven't vocalized that yet. And so being able to market and bring a service that allows them to meet that need becomes really valuable and adds more value to your service to that company as a result.
Yeah, it increases your revenue.
Yeah, and that's it. Yeah, the money's good too.
Little good side effect, a little bit.
Yeah.
Cool. So you mentioned you get like a lot of referrals from your existing client base.
Yeah.
Like, what do you think drives that? Because that's the dream, right? Like anyone running a business wants like high quality word of mouth.
Yeah.
It's the best marketing you can get.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's driven by, providing a service that is valuable to that client and that they find value and they find useful, right? And then, because you kind of turn that person into a fan of yours, that makes them want to, like, when they hear their other peers say, oh yeah, my tax account totally screwed something up this year. Like, someone have any good recommendations? Like, they'll be willing to go and make that introduction and reach out and say, yeah, I have a perfect fit for you. And I think it all comes back to really, having a good service they offer, but also good customer experience and thinking about that kind of customer success component of it. Because yeah, you could do the greatest job on a tax return and the greatest bookkeeping ever, but if you're not serving your client well and making sure they have a good experience through that process as a result, like you're not going to get that traction that you want. So, we invested a lot in like that kind of customer success function. We have someone on our staff that's what they focus on, is how do we make sure that we are delivering the best service we can? And if we're falling short, how do we fix that and remedy that? But proactively ask that question over and over again, because that's where you start to really ingratiate yourself into them and say like, hey, like, we're not just here to sell you more services. We're here to give you a good service and have a good experience. And what can we do better in that? Or even like, we had a situation here recently where we knew that this client didn't need the service that we're offering anymore. But they were still paying for it and they weren't unhappy or anything, but we knew that like, okay, that's probably not the right service and we need to cut that out. And so we could have just sat around and just waited for them to realize and get frustrated enough and come to us and say, hey, right, can you cut that service out? Because we know that's garbage. We don't need it anymore. Or do we be proactive and say, hey, like, let's touch base. Like, we know we're providing the service to you. You don't need that service anymore. What if we cut that out? What does that look like? Is there anything else we could help you with? And we did that to them, right? And doing that means we're going to lose revenue. But that created such a better relationship there. And they were so thankful, like, yeah, like, that is so stand up of you guys to like notice that and like make that recommendation, even though that's going to hurt your bottom line, that we now have a better relationship and we're doing different things now as a result there. From that conversation of like, we shouldn't be doing this thing for you anymore because that's not as valuable to you. And I think that's something that maybe accountants or any business owner, like they don't necessarily want to do that because they know, right, well, I'm gonna take a loss hit on that if I do that. But that just creates a better experience, and that better experience is going to lead to better revenue over time.
Absolutely, it's definitely a long-term view. So the person that's responsible for kind of customer success, like, is it kind of defining what that onboarding experience is? Is it maintaining certain touch points with the client? Like, what's the remit?
Yeah, so it's really looking at kind of that customer journey from beginning to end, right? From the point of awareness through how we sell to them, how we onboard them, making sure they're cared for through that, and then making sure they're cared for through the service. And making sure that feeling from marketing to sales to onboarding to service feels the same across the board and doesn't feel like you market to me one way and then you're selling me something totally different that feels like totally different than what I experienced in that awareness phase. And so just kind of making sure that's consistent, and then just that proactive of like reaching out, checking in. Hey, how's everything going? Like, we haven't heard from you in a while. Like, is there things we can do better for you? Or is there anything else we can provide you? Or is there some things that we can help you with, right? Just like being proactive and like just checking in on them is a super valuable help there, because it shows that you're not just here to like deliver a service and be done, right? Like, you're developing a relationship and you're developing, this thing that, is going to be a long-term deal and not just this kind of transactional nature.
Got it. That makes sense. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Like, what is that initial like onboarding experience for Lance CPA clients?
Yeah, so it basically starts with, kind of getting them, identifying that scope, getting them sold on that, getting them engaged on that, and then kind of starting the process of like, what does it mean to have this kind of client relationship with us? And we kind of see that in like a 3-month window. So it's not just let's get them on board as quickly as possible so we can get the service and then like start serving them. It's, we'll start doing some of that service work, but onboarding is a period of time because we're starting to develop this relationship. We're trying to build trust. We're trying to make sure they're receiving everything we're giving them. It can be like a fire hose at the beginning of like, here's all the things we need and here's all the information you need to know and here's some financial reports we'll throw at you and good luck, right? Like, it's like, how do we like develop that process so they know who we are, they know how we work with each other, develop those expectations up front, and then start to build in those services over time to not just throw it all in at once, but like, right, we're gonna start with transition to accounting work. And then we're going to start with, starting to do some forecasts with you. Like, we're going to space that out a little bit so that it's not all at once, but then they kind of get a feel of how this all works and make sure that that's what they want and that's the right relationship for them. And it's the same thing for us too. We want to make sure that this is the right relationship for us as well. We're not bought into something that we realize that's not the right relationship. And so we kind of think about that in that 90-day window of having checkpoints with there, to having reach outs where we can actually kind of talk through those things and make sure this is the right fit for us.
Nice. Okay, cool. So it sounds like it's a combination of just actually having a structure in place where, okay, These are kind of the checkpoints that we're going to get through in the first, say, 90 days. But also managing kind of the relationship components in a meaningful way, like setting those expectations.
Yeah. Yeah, the expectation part I think is key, because it's very easy to come into this new relationship, pick up an accountant before, right? And they may already have some things in their minds of like what accountants are and how the work is done and the value and all that stuff, right? And so you're kind of have to reframe some of that stuff, or even get on the same wavelength as far as what we mean by different words, right? Like, what do we mean by accounting? What does entail, and like what's in there? And so you're really just trying to get on the right on the same page from the beginning, and make sure we're aligned with the expectations. They know what to expect of us. They know what we expect of them, because it's a two-way street here. And if we're starting to feel misaligned at any point, that we proactively reach out and say, hey, something seems off here, or it seems like we're getting some curt responses from you, right? Like, can we talk about what's going on here? And not just like deal with it, or like, duck and hope it blows over, right? Like, let's address the problem. Let's talk about it, and work through some of that stuff. And I think that, again, that builds that trust, and then builds that, like, this is a relationship that we're building over time, and not just this transactional thing where we're going to throw you some financials and taxes and that's it, right? Like, this is something that is actually, something that we're investing in over a period of time with the relationship. We want to make sure it's good. And if we're out of misalignment, or it's not feeling right anymore, we talk about that, and maybe we have to separate and go our separate ways, but at least we're being proactive and not just waiting for them to come to us and start yelling at us and pull the plug.
Of course. That's awesome. Like the frequency of touch points and the proactivity.
Yeah.
Is it, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. Like, that's the best customer experience you can have, where someone's like being upfront and engaged, and even if it's not working, it's still kind of nice, right?
Right.
Because you probably feel it's not working either.
Exactly. Yeah. It shouldn't come surprise to you if they feel it's not working, because you probably feel the exact same way, and you're probably frustrated, but you don't do anything about it because you're like, well, I need the money, or, well, like, I'll just suffer through it, like, such is life, right? Like, we don't want to do that. Like, we don't want to be in a position where, like, we're hating working with the client, or we see their email come through and it's going to shudder. Like, we want to actually have that relationship where it's like, right, like, this isn't working. Like, we've had that conversation before. It's like, hey, I don't think this is working anymore. That's okay. Like, no one's at fault here, and no one's upset about that. But like, let's figure out how we can then, move on from this in a peaceful way. And we actually had really good experiences with that, where like they appreciated, like, yeah, like, I was feeling frustrated too. I'm glad you brought it up. Like, if you think like separating through this and we find a new account's the best route, then that's great. Like, and we'll help you do that, and like, we'll help you like go through that process. And we even had it with one client where like we're still in contact with them, just from a friendly nature, right? Like, because like we did value the relationship to the point where it's like, hey, like, working together is not the right option anymore.
Yeah, that makes sense. And like, when you're building that kind of initial bond with the client and building a relationship, like, how important is it that their beers actually taste good?
That's important. I don't want to be I don't want to have to lie to them and say, this is good. This is good job here, guys. No, it's, we have to have the relationship where we can say, like, we have that relationship with the client where it's like, I'm just going to be honest with you, like, the beer isn't, that up to the quality I would expect from you, right? Like, and it's good. Like, we should have that relationship where we can say that, and not just, say like, oh, this is great, and like, oh, I wonder why you don't have any more customers coming anymore, right? Like, be honest there. Like, and that's part of having the relationship, just being honest with each other, and giving that hard feedback, right? We want that hard feedback from them too. Like, if we're screwing up or not doing the right thing, tell us. Like, that's not going to make us cry and like run into the corner. Like, we want to know that so we can fix that. Same way, like, they would want to know, like, if their beer sucked. We should tell them. Should let them know. Right?
I'm a potential customer.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
That's cool. And so how, like, last one or two questions on kind of customer experience. Like, how frequently are you in touch with your clients?
Yeah, it kind of depends on the client and relationship to work, but usually it's the latest we go without a contact is 3 months. And that's like when we're kind of just doing like some maybe basic tax work or something like that, right? If we're actually having an ongoing relationship, we're in contact with them weekly. We're having kind of genuine check-ins on a monthly basis where it's not about the numbers, it's about the relationship. and just making sure like, hey, is this good? Like, it's still working. I think the longer you wait, the longer you push that off, like, especially with the client where you know things aren't going well, like they're feeling the same thing too. Like they're not going to be surprised. And frankly, they're probably waiting to, make that call to you and they don't want to do it. Right. So yeah, no, having those regular touch points I think is key. And again, it's about building that relationship. Because you do that during that sales process. That whole sales process is about building a relationship with them. And then if you kind of ignore that, like right now we're just doing accounting here and doing some bookkeeping, then they start to feel like this isn't like what happened here. Like this doesn't feel the same. This doesn't feel right. And then you start to lose that kind of connection that you had. Eventually that may sour to the point where it's like, hey, I don't feel connected to them at all. And I'm going to find a new accountant who actually understands and listens to me.
Got it. Makes sense. And like, I think, on the topic of like tech stack, I think we all generally understand why software is like so critical to delivering that client experience. Obviously, a topic that's near and dear to like our heart is like banking, right? Which is a relatively new thing to be introducing to your clients. And so, like, what shifted from your perspective that you were like, okay, like I want to actually influence where my clients are banking because it actually helps me deliver a better customer experience.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of it shifts from, it's either shifted from, dealing with like bad bank feeds, right? Like, especially like you're always like, I gotta fix this, like that's frustrating, or I have to like contact them to like get the information I actually need. And all shifts was, I think, with, some of the other services or things like this would be easier for us to work together if this was in place, right? So simple things like, having a bill pay functionality, right? Having another software to do that, which is fine and good, like that may not something that's necessary for that type of client. But if I'm trying to use their banking platform to do that, then it sucks, right? It's some smaller bank, they don't have a great platform. It's painful to use, painful to get information out of, like that just makes our jobs a lot harder as a result here. So when you have that, like, especially with bank feeds and modern accounting, right? Like that's kind of like the engine that drives all this thing, right? And if you have bad information coming from your bank, it makes it harder for you to do that accounting and reconciliation as a result. So finding ways to make that easier, right? So like, having the ability for Relay to actually integrate into the software versus having to do a screen scrape function, like, and how different that is from the experience of data that you get through there is huge. And it saves us the time of like, oh crap, like the bank feed broke 3 weeks ago. Like, how do we go fix this and like import the information we're missing and like have to find our logins again, like all that stuff, right? Like that's painful. And that's painful to the client too. Like we have a community bank that's local here to Chicago, and their feeds just don't work. They like never work at all, right? And then it's like we have to manually import everything. It's frustrating the client because they expect us to have the books in order, and part of that's having the bank feeds come in. And if that sucks, then they're looking at us like, hey, this sucks. Like, why aren't you fixing this? Why aren't you doing anything here? Like, and having a better partner in that is important, because that actually allows us to do the work we need to do without spending all the time fixing bank feeds and trying to figure out their bill pay system and things like that.
It's so funny. It's like the client blames the advisor, right? And the advisor blames the accounting software.
Yeah.
And the accounting software blames the bank.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like, it's a game of handoff, I guess.
Right.
Yeah, but it is really the banking, right?
Yeah.
If your bank isn't doing it, you need to find a new one.
Yeah.
So how did you so the craft brewery piece feels like the story in terms of like developing that expertise, developing that niche was, 1, personal interest, and then 2, just over time, like you had clients, you got good at it, you learned the ins and outs. How did the digital marketing, like agency piece come into play?
Yeah, that actually came, it was fun. It actually came after a branding process, right? So we did this brand process, put a whole new website out. It looks great. It's awesome. And then we started noticing these digital marketing agencies like hit up our website. And like, what's going on here, right? Like, and they're like coming through and like scheduling calls with us. And as we started doing those calls with them, what they basically said was like, we want an accounting firm that gets us. And we see your website, and it's like, you get us, you understand us. Like your website is something that we would be proud of to build ourselves. And that's something that we find passion in, and that you look different and your website looks different than your competitors. That's the sell. That was the sell there, right? So that's literally what it was like, we actually paid attention to our website and our branding, put that out there. and that actually attracted, even though it said nothing about digital marketing agencies, said nothing about, like nothing about that was said that, it attracted them in because they saw, and with digital marketing companies, they care about aesthetic, they care about how things look and how they feel and function. And if you have a clunky website that looks outdated, right? Like, is that someone they want to work with from a business standpoint, right? They want to have people that get them. And that, like, we actually spent money on branding, and a nice website was a way to, like, oh, you get us. Like, this actually looks professional. It looks like something that meets our aesthetic, kind of qualities. And hey, can you do work for us? Like, can you help us out, right? And it's like, yeah, we can. And so we started seeing that. It kind of happened, again, organically. Weren't looking to do, target them or anything like that. But we started just getting these organic, people coming in, and that's what kind of led to it.
Nice. And so, like, okay, beginning of the journey, had some craft breweries on board. Also took on other clients that were like less niche focused, but you're like, let's keep the lights on here, right?
Exactly.
And they're like, okay, we're at a good enough place. Let's offboard those clients. And then digital marketing agencies come along and they're like, hey, this could be a great fit. What was the decision-making process there in terms of kind of expanding out beyond kind of the craft brewery niche?
Yeah, I think part of it was just a diversification. So we weren't all eggs in one basket with one industry. And so we had kind of a split of that. And I think it also was, the clients are actually kind of similar. Breweries are very creative people. The people who run breweries are very, very creative people. And you can see that, through the beer studies, see their can designs and their branding, right? They're creative people. And so it's like, we like working with creative people. And we found that in the kind of organically by working with craft breweries, we kind of found that, like, hey, these are all these creative people and like work with them. And then we had these digital agency people, which are also creative people. And it's like, well, if we like working with the creative people in the brewing industry, we're probably gonna like working with the digital agency folks. It's a diversification in our niche. So we're not, eggs in one basket there. And let's try it out. Let's see how that works and how it fits and feels. And so that was something that happened maybe about 2 years ago or so. And we started doing that, and we really liked it. We thought, like, hey, this is actually, we enjoy working with them just like we work with breweries. It's different. It's professional services. It's not, manufacturing a food product, but it's doing something different. But we like that, and we know how to do service agencies because we know how to do our own accounting. Like, we can figure that out, right? Like, we can figure out them as well. And so, like, it was like one of these things. Like, I think this actually, let's invest in this. Let's actually put some effort into marketing towards them. Let's put some effort into building out some marketing materials that are specific to them, that's not just brewery focused. And that started to work out pretty well because we started to find, and the comment we always got from them was like, our previous accountant was an old school accountant. Their website was kind of embarrassing to look at. And like, it was hard. And like, that's the things they cared about. It's like simple things like a website was actually something they cared a lot about. So, and so, yes, that's what we kind of saw, is like, hey, let's move towards that way, because I think that's a good place to go next for our firm, and that's worked out really well for us.
And so, perhaps, like, it sounds like there was a little bit of a seed planted already of like thinking about diversifying out from craft breweries.
Yeah, there was a little bit of that thought of like, not that like we felt like we had to do it, but it's like, hey, like, just from a long-term business plan perspective, we could stick with all doing breweries, and that may be fine, but we also want to make sure that we are thinking long-term and making sure that, we're not concentrated fully in just one industry. And so we saw like, okay, well, we have this opportunity that's come up kind of out of left field, but it works for us. And so let's pursue that and see what we can make that work. And that's worked. It's worked in a similar fashion as breweries, right? It gets the same kind of like, everyone knows everybody type of thing. Let's, do good work. We start to get the referrals, right? That same kind of snowball starts to happen there as well.
Yeah, it's interesting when you're building a business and you have this service, right?
Yeah.
And there's the core customer segment that you expect to come in the door, right? The craft breweries in the case. And then as you evolve and kind of grow, new types of customers start showing up. If they start showing up in like a high enough volume, you're like, okay, I should probably listen to like whatever's happening here, because it's beyond kind of what we originally like envisioned. Or at least that's been like my experience. I don't know if that lines up for
That's
you.
exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And then like you talked a lot about kind of expanding out the services that you offer to your clients. And you said that, really it's just, again, aligning on what are the things you're hearing consistently from the customer base. like, how do you determine whether something's a distraction for your firm or not?
That's a good question. And I'd be the wrong person to ask that, because I'm the one that's like, ooh, shiny object. Let me go chase that for a bit. No, I think it all stems from having a good long-term vision of where you want your firm to go. And having that goal inside and figure out, okay, what are the strategies that allow us to obtain that goal? I think that helps kind of makes the decision, okay, should we chase that shiny object or not? Because it can be very easy. Someone pops up, someone says, hey, I'm an electrician, and I think you would be great for us. And then, you start doing stuff like, oh, maybe this is the thing, right? But then if that's not really where you want your business to go, or that fits in with your long-term value, now you're distracted yourself, and you're going to slow down, and you're going to kind of blunt the strategy that you have of your other industries or other things you're trying to do within your firm as a result there. And so I think that it's hard to say no sometimes, particularly when people are trying to hand you money to do stuff, but like, you do have to have those kind of that willpower to say like, no, that's not the right fit. And knowing that if I take that on, that's going to distract me, and that's going to, screw up our processes, and that's going to make my team upset, because now I have to do all these different things that don't fit with what we're trying to do already. And instead, let's focus on what we want to do, because those kind of flash in the pan things, or things that pop up that that aren't really aligned with what you want, are going to be the things that almost kind of pull you down as a result. And so, and sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's like, oh, like, maybe we should try this. Like, maybe let's play around over here. But having done that and knowing the ramifications of that, like that's not actually the way that I want to operate as a result. So, we do kind of like a 3-year strategy plan that we kind of continuously update and kind of look and say, okay, if we're making decisions about our firm, does it fit within this plan? And if it does, great, like, let's pursue that. But if it doesn't, we have to have a lot of good reasons to go that route and push away what we had in our plan. Because if you do that and it doesn't work, then you've kind of screwed things up for you in a long-term nature.
Got it. And so if you're like going back a couple of years, when you had basically like outsourced accounting, outsourced bookkeeping, tax was like the core services, and you were just starting to think about adding like kind of advisory services, like what, how do you determine that right jumping off point? Are you just really waiting for a client to come and ask you those types of questions? How do you think about it?
Yeah, I think you have to understand what you can actually do. I think it's very easy, especially for accountants when it comes to advisory, to say like, oh, we can do all these different things. Like, we can become instant experts in cash flow management if you've never done that before, right? And I think there's some kind of professional responsibility to say like, what is actually in our wheelhouse and what's not in our wheelhouse. If this thing is not in our wheelhouse, then like, we can't pursue that or can't start selling that, because we're going to be unable to actually produce and fulfill that, or we're going to come off as frauds in that, right? So it can be very easy to be like, hey, let's just do forecasting for all our clients, right? Like, but if that's not what you know to do, then that again, that can distract from what you're doing, and then it looks like you don't know what you're doing. And then you'd say you get a client that signs up for forecast services, you don't know how to do forecasts, and then that's going to look poorly on you as a professional. So there is that kind of professional responsibility to say like, okay, what do we know how to do? What's in our wheelhouse and that we like doing, and what's outside that? And let's not do those things, but let's focus on those advisory elements that are the things that are in our wheelhouse, right? So for us, like going with the HR route, we went that route because we had people internally who had HR backgrounds, and we're still passionate about that. And so it's like, we have the expertise in-house to do this. So this is a good place to pursue. Going and saying like, okay, we're going to start doing valuation work, for instance, right? Like, no one in our firm has valuation experience whatsoever. We could kind of fumble around and come up with some numbers and slap it on the page and call it evaluation, but we don't have that professional responsibility to do that well. And so like, we need to say no to those options and have a place we can refer that out to, and only say yes to the things like, yep, that's things we can do and it fits our wheelhouse.
Got it. So it's really a combination of kind of hearing what the client's looking for and aligning that with, your skill set. Like, what are you uniquely positioned to do?
Yeah. And I think it's, I think that's key. And I see firms that have struggled because they started doing advisor services they had no business doing. And then that, just kind of, falling flat for them. So you do have to kind of make that internal assessment and say, okay, what do we have the skill set for? If there's something that you think like, hey, we should be doing this and we don't have the skill set, we need to go hire for that skill set and bring someone in-house who can do that work. Otherwise, we shouldn't be pursuing things that we don't know what we're doing.
Right. That makes sense. That makes perfect sense. Okay. Last question for you. I mean, I think we can all agree that 2020 has been a crazy year, just a little bit. What's been like your biggest takeaway?
I think it's been just trusting the process, trusting your goals, right? Like, I think when all of this happened here in March, right? Like everything shut down, there was a bit of a panic, like, oh crap, like this is gonna kill our breweries. Like, what are we doing? Like, and there's a little sense of like trying to like, kind of tighten up a bit and like, and kind of, almost going into dormancy and like, let's just ride out the storm, right? But I think we had goals and process and things in mind. It's like, if we can continue going down that path will work. We have to trust our processes and trust our goals, and not shy away from that. Even though it's harder now to maybe achieve some of that stuff, it's still worthwhile to do, right? So, for us, it was really like doubling down on like how we service our clients. And so we did things like, start up a Slack group for all of our breweries and like invite them in. That'd be a place where like we would shoot out information and answer questions and stuff like, and that was hugely valuable, because that was something that people were trying to, get, questions answered quickly and try to figure out what's going on. And like, that was a way to reach out to them. And that's something we had in the back of our minds that we were going to do at some point. It was like, right, this is now or never. Let's just do it and let's see how this works. And it worked out really well. But again, that was trusting our process and our goals and our strategies, and like, and making sure that we just fulfilled those things because we knew those were sound and would work. But we couldn't be afraid of like, okay, now let's try out the new things. Now let's double down on what we're trying to do. Because, doing something else and deviate from there was going to probably cause us to lose clients or do things like that. Whereas in this case, we didn't lose any clients this time. In fact, we added a bunch of clients because we were in the arena with them and answering those questions and being there right beside them as they're going through that stuff. And again, trusting, hey, we have the expertise in the process to do this and deliver upon it. And let's focus on what we know.
That's awesome. I love the, like, just hearing the whole story. It's consistently like running towards the problems, almost, right?
Yeah.
Even, I think we all call the last 6 months or 9 months or whatever it's been, 3 years, I don't know. Certainly a crisis. And the fact that your firm is like, okay, we need to support them more now than ever. And let's spin up a Slack group, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we can communicate in real time and work through this together.
Yeah.
And it's awesome. It's really, really awesome.
Yeah.
Kudos. So we have like 7 minutes. If people have questions, please pop them in the Q&A or the chat, whatever feels good, whatever feels comfortable. Yeah. You can do it anonymously if you would like, if that's more comfortable. Cool. What was the, like, do you have any clients that were kind of near? Oh, there we go. We got a question from Cindy. What is your tech stack?
Tech stack. Oh boy. Good question. Yeah. So everything's cloud-based. So, we use Xero as our primary accounting tool, Gusto, Relay for our banking. We use HubDoc. I think HubDoc is a big part of our stack. We use Futurely for some of the forecasting work and Fathom for a lot of the KPI and benchmarking stuff we do. So we do a lot of benchmarking work within the brewery industry. And so that's a great tool for us there. We use Practice Ignition for all of our proposals and getting paid and all that stuff. Engagement letters. Basecamp is our internal communication tool, which I think being virtual remote is you have to have a good place for communication and organization internally, otherwise it can just be chaotic. And so that's where all of our like work papers reside and our communication, internally about our clients reside. That's where kind of we keep kind of the stack of like perm files and all those types of things. Basically being that kind of internal knowledge database and way we communicate internally. And so I think that part's pretty key. We use things like Box for, storing files and sharing with our clients. We use ProConnect Tax Online for our tax software. What else do we have? I think that's the big the big things in the tech stack. Carbon for workflow management. So yeah, those are the big tech stack things. Yeah. So that is our tech stack. Yeah.
What's something you've added in the last 12 months? Like what solution have you added in the last 12 months that's made a big impact on your practice?
Oh, good
You
question.
don't have to say Relay.
So I will say Relay, because I think that has been good, especially where a lot of clients we've been working with in the last 3-4 months that have been starting up businesses. There have been a ton of people starting up businesses. And so we've been helping them through that whole kind of startup phase. And obviously part of that's getting your legal docs together, but then it's like get a business bank account, stop spending money in your personal account for this stuff. And so Relay has been a good tool just to add that in there as like, okay, when we set you up, this is what we're going to do. So I think that would probably be one for us. I think the other, I would say the other one, probably be Carbon. So we've only been Carbon for a couple months now. We were all on Trello, which was good, but it's kind of getting to the breaking point with the size of our firm. So we needed something different. And that's been good too, because it's given me a good kind of bird's eye view where everything's at.
Nice. All right. Do we have any other questions?
It's a quiet group today. Everyone's taking their afternoon nap here.
Yeah,
Lull
exactly.
them into that NPR kind of,
Yeah, I don't know what it is about fall, but I feel like I think it was last week. I had like a bunch of calls and I was like, everyone feels like they're grumpy. I don't know. Maybe I'm just grumpy. I don't know.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you, everyone. Kathy's saying, I've gotten a lot of great information. Cindy's saying, enjoyed hearing your story. Thanks, everyone, for making time. Josh, thanks so much for joining us, for sharing your tale. And hope everyone has a great rest of their Wednesday.
Yep. Thank you. See you, everyone.